Hello, hello. Hi, YouTube. 12:59. Getting ahead of things a little bit today. I got a couple comments already from Jacob Inouye. Jacob. Anyway, you're here all the time, and it's always great to see you. So thanks for checking in. I wondered if you were able to track down that Gamera T-shirt from last week because I know you were commenting that you really like that. It is Monday, and I'm at home today because I've got a little bit of a headache, feverish thing, but it's weird. Can you be under the weather during COVID and have that be okay? Because I don't think it's COVID. I can smell fine. I'm not congested. I can taste. I can breathe just fine. I think it's just kind of a weird, achy fever thing. But anyway, I didn't want to be in the office while I have any symptoms, but I'm 99% sure it's not COVID related, but isn't that what they all say? So I'm not worried about it, but I'm trying to take some precautions, and that's why I'm here in my home. And yesterday we talked about the Jesus weeping over Jerusalem. Although in the Luke version, he doesn't specifically weep. That comes in the other synoptic gospel versions of it. But we talked about his heart. Jacob still wants my shirt. I got it on Etsy. Go to Etsy.com and do a search for Gamera. That's where I got it. I'm going to keep my own shirt because I'm a big Gamera fan. I have a little statue of him downstairs in another room. So anyway, Jesus talking about Jerusalem and dealing with all the Herod stuff. I love talking about Herod in sermons. It's not the first time I've done the backstory on Herod because he shows up a couple times in the Gospels. And I preached through Mark maybe 6 years ago now. And I remember talking about Herod then, and we talked about Herod a little bit already in Luke. And so anytime he comes up, I love kind of rolling up my sleeves and doing some of that history stuff. And I'd be happy to recap all of the Herod stuff even today as we go. You know, it was really funny. If you were in church a couple weeks ago, you know my buddy Matt Whitman, who has the 10-minute Bible hour stuff. He has asked for my help on his daily audio podcast. I provide some music for that, and I edit his episodes before I go to bed at night. And he sent me like a week's worth of files for this coming week on his audio podcast yesterday. So after the Super Bowl, I went down and I started editing them, and it's a whole week on the life and family of Herod Antipas. He's going through Matthew, and he's up to the part where Herod kills John the Baptist. And so he's doing a whole week on the history of the Herods. And I just thought that was hilarious because he had no idea that that's what I taught on yesterday. And that was kind of fun. Actually, speaking of that, Saturday, I did a memorial service for Christine Lindenmuth, who is a friend of some of the ladies at Grace Church from Bible Study Fellowship and Community Bible Study things here in Longmont. And I didn't really know her that well, but I was preparing the message for the funeral for Saturday. My dad did the graveside service on Friday. He and I did not compare notes. Friday is my new day off, so he stepped in to help with that. And anyway, as I'm writing the stuff, I've done a lot of funerals in my life, and I have a couple kind of back pocket funeral messages if I'm called in by a funeral home to do one for someone I don't know. Obviously, it's easier when they're a believer, and I can bring out, the gospel, and the room is going to be full of believers who are. It's kind of a home field advantage, so to speak. But as I was working on that funeral message for Saturday, I had this impulse to totally change the passage and the theme I was doing. And instead of focusing in on the passage I was on, I just had this sense of I should teach for the funeral. I should do the message on 2 Corinthians 5, that being absent from the body is being present with the Lord. Well, as I dug into the passage, there's a lot in there about the tent that we have on this earth, which is our bodies, which we will shed so that we will be taken up into a heavenly dwelling. And I've never taught on that before in a memorial service setting. I think I've taught it maybe once when I taught through 2 Corinthians, maybe 15 years ago. I love 2 Corinthians. I love especially 2 Corinthians 5. It's such a great passage, the whole chapter, but I'd never done that before. So I worked that out and I got up, and every eulogy that came before me, there were 2 eulogies, brought something to bear about what was in that passage. Not specifically quoting, but thematically it was clear. And so I got up and I did my thing, and I came down after the service was over, and my dad was in the service. He said, "That was the passage I used at the graveside yesterday." So those things happen sometimes, and have that happen, like it felt like 4 degrees of things all coming together for that passage to be the right passage at that service on Saturday, and then to go into yesterday, which was Herod stuff, which always makes me happy. But then to find out, oh, I got a whole week of Herod stuff to edit, and then the whole podcast audience gets to find out more about Herod as well. So that's a pro tip and a recommendation for you if you want to dig deeper into the life of Herod Antipas, or Herod the Great, or Herod Agrippa, or Herodias, or Herod Philip, or all those guys. 10-Minute Bible Hour audio podcast is going to be the place to go. But I will recap it now just because I think it's awesome. So after Alexander the Great kind of conquered the world, he set up shop with trying to Greekify the Mediterranean area and everywhere that he had power, after he beat the Persians, which, okay, let's back up a minute. You have the Egyptians. They're the big empire. And then they let the Moses and the Israelites go back to the promised land, and then Joshua takes the promised land. Then you have the empires fighting between the Philistines and the Israelites, but Egypt is still kind of the big power at that time. And so all the kings of Israel, they would get in trouble if they'd run to Egypt for help instead of trusting God. And so then you have the people of God after David and Solomon. There's a civil war, and so then there's a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. The northern kingdom gets taken by the Assyrian Empire, and they were nasty, and they became kind of the world killers at that time and wiped out those tribes. And then the southern kingdom of Judah, which is just the 2 tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Is that right? Man, I should know that off the top of my head. Pretty sure it's Judah and Benjamin. Anyway, they get taken to Babylon, who has now defeated the Assyrians, and they take the people from the southern kingdom of Judah into exile. And that's where a lot of the stuff like Daniel shows up, and a lot of the prophets in the Old Testament are speaking to those days of, here come the Assyrians. Oh, there go the Assyrians with all our people. Uh-oh, the Babylonians are coming. Uh-oh, now we're in exile. Are we ever going to get to be able to go home? Well, the Babylonians lose their kingdom to the Persians and the Medes in a midnight coup. This is the scene in Daniel where the hand is writing on the wall, and Daniel interprets it, and he basically says to the Babylonian leaders, you guys just lost your whole kingdom, and the Persians are like right there. And so then the Persians take over, Cyrus the Great, and then his successors, Darius and Xerxes and Artaxerxes, they come into play in biblical narrative as well, with people like Esther. But they let Nehemiah and Ezra and a bunch of people go back to the land to rebuild the walls and rebuild the temple. And that's kind of Old Testament history. Now, after Malachi happens, Alexander the Great conquers the known world, and he beats the Persians, the Battle of Marathon, you might have heard of it. And so then he kind of Greekifies everything. And there's a group of people in Israel that don't want to be Greekified. They want to go back to what they were building when they came back from Persia. And so that's when the Maccabean Revolution happens, where the oil didn't run out, and that's where Hanukkah gets celebrated. And they set up a system of a king regime again. Fast forward after that, and then Rome comes in, and Caesar takes over all of what had been Greek and became the Roman Empire, but it was still kind of Greek, and now it's Roman. And the Romans didn't want to micromanage the way all the other empires did, so they said, yeah, keep your ethnic kings. And so the ethnic king that came out of that was a guy named Herod the Great. And he wasn't really great. He wasn't even really a friend of the Jewish people. He was kind of he came from this group called the Hasmonean dynasty. And he just kind of ruled as a puppet king, as kind of a political expedience for Rome, but always under the thumb of whatever Rome wanted to do. And Herod was a good politician and was able to do stuff. And he did do a lot of things, that I suppose you could call good in terms of advancement because he had the Romans behind him. And he was the one who killed all the babies in Bethlehem when the Magi came and said, you shouldn't. You should be careful because the real king is coming. And he's like, uh-oh, I don't like that idea. And so where's he going to be born? And they're like, well, we're heading to Bethlehem. And he's like, well, report back to me what you find. And they're like, yeah, no, we don't think we'll do that. So they left. But he eventually did all those horrible things. And actually, another story about Herod the Great you can find out in Josephus is when he died, he was so scared there wouldn't be mourners at his funeral. And he had killed a bunch of his family members to try and protect whatever lineage he wanted because he thought they were coming against him. But knowing he was about to die so that he would have mourners at his funeral, he had his army go out and slaughter a bunch of people in a couple cities so that they would be grieving. That's the kind of guy Herod the Great was. Anyway, after he died, Rome's like, we're going to distribute, because you didn't really have an heir that you liked, you killed them all. We're going to distribute your land into these 4 categories, and we'll own one of them. And then Galilee will be run by this guy, Herod Antipas, who was Herod the Great's son, one of them. And Herod had a lot of kids with a lot of different ladies, and then they had kids, and so he had a granddaughter named Herodias. I don't know what her birth name was. Maybe it was Herodias. I suppose in those kind of families, you take the main guy's name and you make it a girl's name. That's kind of what happened. So anyway, he had a granddaughter named Herodias, and he had a son named Philip, and he had a son named Antipas. And Philip married his niece Herodias, and Herod Antipas decided he wanted to have his brother's wife, and so he married her. And that's where the Herod of the Gospels really comes into play. Other than the birth narrative of Jesus, if you find the word Herod in the Gospels, it's talking about Antipas, and it's this guy. He was the one who killed John the Baptist. He was the one who kind of investigated Jesus at his trial. He's the one who thought Jesus was the resurrected John the Baptist because he couldn't imagine 2 guys would have that kind of a following and be able to do cool stuff. And he's like, I already killed that guy. What's going on? He's like, well, no, this is another guy. This is actually probably the Messiah. And so he tells the Pharisees, or the Pharisees at least speculate on their own, that Herod is going to want to kill Jesus. And so they go and warn him, and Jesus is like, yeah, he may want to kill me, but I really don't have time for that right now because I have more work to do. So I'll let him kill me when I decide. That's okay. And of course, Herod can't kill anyone without Rome say so. And that's how we get to eventually the Passion Week of Jesus, where he has to stand before Pilate, who sends him to Herod, who sends him back to Pilate, because nobody really wants to take responsibility for this. They just don't want a big riot. And so all that political background is loaded into the Gospels. And I think a lot of times, because we don't know our history very well, we miss some of the significance of that. So for Luke, who is writing after all of these events, right? And he's been, this whole book, he's been the journalist extraordinaire. He's been interviewing people, trying to get all the stories straight, and then he puts them in a particular order to make clear points, like, who is this guy? What is the right posture before the king? Is Jesus really who he said he was? Is he innocent? Was he killed by this political machine unjustly? And the answer is yes, because the people who are reading this know all about Herod and Herodias. And that connection I made in the sermon to Ahab and Jezebel and John the Baptist to Elijah, that would have been in everybody's mind at the time. They knew this was a corrupt machine. And Herod and Caiaphas, the high priest and the leader of the temple in Jerusalem, they were only friends because of political expedience, not because they had anything in common. Herod and Herodias were very much the power brokers and the power players, and they went to Roman parties, and they had, in order to do anything with any sort of political clout in the first century, you had to be buddy-buddy with Rome. And one of the things that happened at Herod Antipas's ultimate end was that when the emperors switched from Tiberius to Caligula, Herod Antipas lost his friends. He wasn't in Caligula's inner circle. Not many people were for very long. And so he lost his tetrarchy, and it went to his brother-in-law, Herodias' brother, who also, I guess, would have been his nephew, Agrippa. And Agrippa is the one we see in the book of Acts that Paul deals with. And Antipas gets taken off into exile into Spain, and eventually most people wonder how he died. Some people think Caligula found a way to off him, or if he just died in exile, we don't know. But Antipas was the villain beyond the Pharisees and even beyond Pilate. He really was the villain of the story of the Gospels. So it's always fun to roll up our sleeves and dig into the Herod family. What else did we talk about yesterday? Yesterday also was the idea of Jesus's heart, and the idea that he wanted to do something with these people, but they wouldn't have it. And it's an interesting theological implication of that, because the doctrine of election says the only people who will respond to the love of God are the people he makes respond to his love, or he has chosen and predestined that they would respond to his love. And there's plenty of passages that support that view. I'm not in any way trying to diminish that theological position. But I've always struggled with passages like this one yesterday, that if that is true, and the only way to interpret how salvation works between a sinful, depraved people and a holy and righteous God, why is he so sad about it? Like, that's always kind of, he clearly is having an emotional response to the rejection of him. Now, maybe there is a way to thread that needle and say, well, yeah, God still feels things, even though he has made this the choice of the greatest outcome for his glory. I'm happy with that explanation. But as an emotional person myself, and again, starting in Hebrews like we did, where it says Jesus is the exact representation of God, to me that means in his emotions as well. So the sovereign creator God wants people to respond to him, and they don't. There has to be a way to explain that. And that he has an emotional response when they don't. So again, I'm not trying to solve that theological conundrum today or yesterday, but I think as I've committed, I always want to preach the right tone of the passage that's in front of me, not necessarily a systematic theology pressed into that passage. And this passage to me is so powerful because it reveals the heart of God for people to believe in him, for people to trust him and let him protect them and care for them. And that when they don't, he mourns. I mean, Jesus was in anguish when he said those things. And again, the other gospel writers talk about weeping. And so, again, I don't want a systematic theology of election to take away that power. And that's my intent when I preach passages like that, not necessarily to avoid a controversy or not have a conclusion myself to those theological issues. I just don't want to cram a theological bent into a passage that makes the passage mean something it doesn't mean. And I think the passage yesterday means God has an emotional response when people reject him. And he says, the implication is, had you been willing, I could have done this. That's clearly the implication of that passage. So make of that what you will. Disagree with me if you want, but I just don't think you can steal the power of that passage simply from a Reformed perspective on predestination. And I didn't want to do that. So that was where that came from. Speaking of weird election discussions, Wednesday night we're doing Romans, and we're up to Romans 9, which is every Reformed person that I've ever met, their favorite passage on individual election. I'll give you a preview. I don't think Romans 9 is about individual election at all. I think there are passages in Scripture that are, but not Romans 9. So if you want to find out more about that, you'll have to come on Wednesday, and that could be a good time. It is 1:18. I want to make room for questions and other thoughts. I don't want to just necessarily rant for a half hour. Miriam, that passage has 3 exclamation points. I'm assuming in the text itself that's the emotion of Jesus that you're talking about. Of course, that's a translational thing. I don't think Greek really used exclamation points, but I think Jesus did. I think Jesus absolutely used exclamation points when he talked. And yeah, there's definitely something there about the heart of God that we shouldn't miss. So last week, I totally screwed up. And I haven't seen her on this chat. But Lisa Blake, if you're here, I asked a question about how to pronounce your name. And then within like 3 seconds, I shut off the video and you had a comment come in answering that question. And then we all missed it. So at 1:19, I'm going to give an 11-minute possibility for that to finally be answered. And I'm really sorry that I did that last week. So if you are here, Lise, let me know if you're Lise or Lisa, because I want to give you thanks and respect for checking in so often on these things. So yeah, a couple other things that came out of yesterday. Let's see. Well, we got to announce that the building's paid off. That was pretty awesome. And James, our children's pastor, is going on sabbatical after this coming Sunday. So that'll be kind of an odd thing. We had 6 pastors a little over a year ago, and for a variety of reasons, Pastor Tim retired, Pastor Mike went on to senior pastor, Pastor Ben went up to the mountains, and now Pastor James will be going on sabbatical. So we're all stretched kind of thin. The good news is we have a youth pastor that's getting close to the end of the process, but again, open hands. We don't know what the Lord's going to do with that, but I could use prayers and help. Just because, we're trying to do everything with fewer and fewer people on staff. And then that's a short window. It's a short season. We do intend to bring people back into those roles. And maybe you might be asking, hey, what happened that we lost so many pastors? If I was a church member, I would want to know that. And I am a church member, and I want to know that. So I can speak to that a little bit. The closing of Sandstone was a really important thing for our church. And after a lot of prayer, the elders all believed that, save one who had an objection. And then we went to the congregation, and it was like 93% voted in favor of this, because we were really breaking away from our core values to try and manage 2 campuses. We were no longer relationally connected, and the organizational structure couldn't really support what we were doing. And at the time, we offered anyone on the pastoral staff, but especially Matt and Mike, obviously, because they were there the most, if they just wanted to take that congregation into Frederick Firestone, the rent at Sandstone was going to skyrocket pretty quick. So we had to make some choices. And they were both so exhausted, and understandably so, that the right decision was to close it. Well, what happened with closing it is now we had given opportunities to these guys. Let's use Mike as an example, where he was a guitar player who now was a preacher. And then we took away the preaching, not on purpose, not because he did anything wrong, just we didn't have a second campus where we needed a regular second preacher. So it's totally understandable for him to be like, well, now that I know this is what I want to do, I should go find a place to do that. And then COVID hit. So it was an odd time of kind of reunifying the pastors and our roles under one roof based on what we had been doing before Sandstone and how everything had changed during Sandstone. And it was an awkward team dynamic situation. It really was. And Ben, I think, got pretty burned out by a lot of that as well. All the shifting pieces. I can't speak for them. I can only speak for myself. But I think it was a lot of those things, the organizational headaches and situations, the team dynamics, wondering what the role was next, wondering, I think with anybody who goes through that journey of, okay, I'm a role player on a multi-staff team, but now I've got the experience and the know-how to lead. Would I lead the way that the current leader is leading? And so acknowledging there was some friction a little bit between me and Mike, but I worked really hard to keep him around, to keep Ben around. But at the same time, it felt like, the Lord's leading him, and I'm not going to stand in the way of how that works. And they really do need to lead. They have the capabilities. And so if that's what they're pursuing, I'm not going to stop them. But all of them, Pastor Tim included, there was a lot of chance to say, please stay. We want to make this work. But it was just time. It was time for all of them. And you guys should know some of that background. I know we don't really have a chance to talk openly about that on a Sunday or even in a business meeting, but I love those guys, and they're doing well in their next stage of leadership. And so sometimes that's how God does multiply leaders. And if in the end we become a church that raises up guys who then can go and lead other churches, I don't feel bad about that. And I'm looking forward to restocking the team and being able to develop and work with new faces. So Anyway, that's some of that backstory. I haven't really received emails about it, but the more I think about it, the more I think we should at least just talk openly as best as we can about that, because they're good guys, and we miss them. And during this interim time, where it will be Matt and me for the foreseeable future until we hire a youth pastor or until James gets back from his sabbatical, going from 6 to 2. Whew, that's going to be rough. But the good news is we have Tanya and Carissa, who have been doing a great job with the music ministry. And we have Mary and Catherine, who are stepping in. And I know they're going to do a great job with children's ministry. They've already been doing that as they're kind of on the on-ramp into their roles. So it's a good season. It really is. It's just a tiring season. And so if you're watching this and are willing to help out in any way, that would be great. We need help on the tech side of things. We need help in children's. Honestly, we need help on the new deacon board. If these bylaws go through, that's going to be the board we need to really shore up and get some good leadership on. So those are things you can be praying for and aware of in what's going on in the church. Let's see. We got 5 minutes left. Let's see. I already covered election. I covered Herod. I covered Jesus in Jerusalem. Next week is another healing and a parable at a Pharisee's house about how to throw up a good party. And we're moving into the sequence in Luke where Jesus really, he's getting away from the crowds now. From now until really Holy Week starts, chapter 18, 19, I think it is, we're going to get a lot of parables and we're going to get a lot of internal teaching between Jesus and the disciples to set up what's coming and to really impart to them what the kingdom looks like and how to carry it on after he is gone. And so a lot of the bickering between kingdom of the world and kingdom of God and all the crowds that follow and then they depart because we're actually get to that soon where they depart because his teaching is too harsh. But before then, we have a lot of parables. We have a lot of the famous parables coming up. Luke 15 is the prodigal son parable. And so we're going to be doing a lot in that in the coming weeks. My hope is to get there to chapter 18 by the summer and then take a break and do something different for the summer and then pick up the fourth section, the last section of Luke from Palm Sunday through the resurrection and all the appearances after the resurrection. And do that in the fall, and then hopefully be done with Luke by the end of 2021. And my pattern is to do a New Testament book and then an Old Testament book. And it just so happens that this New Testament book is going to take us 2 years. So I don't know what I'll do for an Old Testament book yet. I'm taking suggestions. I've done, let's see, what have I done? I've done Joshua. I've done the life of David, which is kind of 1 Samuel we did. And then I've done some of the minor prophets. I've done Haggai. I've done Habakkuk. I've done Jonah. I've done some Psalms, series on some Psalms. So we'll see where we go into the Old Testament, but that'll probably be a year from now. We'll have time to get into that. I probably won't do a book like Isaiah, which will take me another 2 years or more to get through. I'll probably do something. Well, we'll see. We'll see what the Spirit says. We'll see how it feels when we get there. But that's the intent here this year, to restock our staff and to continue through the Gospel of Luke and to continue really leaning into this multi-ethnic situation we have as a church. What a great thing that is to be able to partner and have them integrate with us and have us integrate with them even more. We've had some of our musicians lead music with the music team at Grace Latino. Joe does from time to time. Edward did yesterday. And it's really great. And to see more bilingual people coming out and help out, really cool. I told them I was going to try and learn Spanish. I told Grace Latino I was going to try and learn Spanish, and it's weird. I've been doing the app, the what's it called, Duolingo or whatever, and it's actually made me scared of the Spanish I already knew, because like just the stuff I picked up from Living and Sesame Street and just your general Spanish phrases, I'm scared to use them now because I'm like, ooh, is that really correct? Because I'm learning the correct way to do things, and I feel like I know less Spanish than when I started, but I'm working on it. And if anyone has any good Spanish tips, I'm happy to take those. I think it's good for all of us to just prepare for what's coming next. And I got to tell you, partnering with Grace Latino, having a paid off building, having simplified and more biblical organizational structure, and as we replenish our staff, to me, we are in a great, great position for what is coming next in our country and in the kingdom and the revival I think the Spirit's going to bring, as well as the persecution that I think the kingdom of this world's going to bring. And I love that we have all of those things really in place right now. I mean, we're positioning ourselves so well for what's coming and to make disciples and to reach out and love and bless others. I can't wait. That search and rescue boat, it's getting more seaworthy every day. And I'm pretty excited about that. So we are now at 129. I did not get my answer about pronunciation, but if you are watching this later, Lisa, you can send me an email. Sorry to make you front and center in this. I just wanted to find out. So thank you all for checking in. Thank you all for watching this maybe later on as well. Maybe we'll see you Wednesday night. Maybe we'll see you Sunday. Maybe we'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. 1:30 is now. So signing off, Monday Breakdown. Love you guys. Thank you. See you next time.